No role plays, no conference calls, no BS. Chris and Lorenzo share 4 decades of combined experience to help you become a more effective leader. This is Hacking Your Leadership.
Welcome to Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lorenzo.
And welcome to this week's Thoughtful Thursday. Don't forget to follow us on YouTube at Hacking Your Leadership and leave us a review on iTunes. On this Thoughtful Thursday, we're going to be going over the final of our 4-part series on overcoming the dysfunctions of a low-performing team. On the last episode on Monday, we talked about avoidance of accountability as one of the reasons why a team might not be high performing. And the listener feedback that we got was pretty overwhelming along the exact same lines, which was, I am holding my people accountable, but no one sees it because I can't just publicly call out, Lorenzo, you did a terrible job, get better, amongst Lorenzo's peers. That has to be a kind of a private conversation. And so there's this opinion that there isn't accountability, but I know that there is. And the first thing I think when I hear that is maybe, but a lot of times that isn't necessarily the case. Like I have been in situations where I'd like to think there's accountability, but there really isn't. But I've also been in situations where, the wheels of justice move slowly. So there's this kind of nuance here where if you want to maintain the trust on the team and you want people to believe that there is accountability, but they don't necessarily, see it, in front of everybody. It's a tough one.
It's definitely a tough one. And again, I think it's one of those things that when you have, a high performing team or you're trying to get through the dysfunction of a low performing team can be really, really important. People have to know that, like, if I'm going to put forth my best effort, if I'm really going to commit to this, and if I'm really going to believe that we can do this collectively, I have to know that every person next to me is doing a good job or a great job, or they're just as committed. And that's kind of like the feeling that needs to happen in an average maybe performing team, or that type. Like I think that space sometimes is created for those that are not performing to kind of stick around and to not be so involved in what everybody else is doing. But in this context, it's so important from a leadership standpoint that you are establishing this, that this is something that not only people, that they don't necessarily hear, but that they feel. They feel there's an element of accountability that happens, and there's a lot of ways that can be measured. And when it comes to like things like turnover and stuff like that, kind of on the one side of the spectrum, but also like in the essence of just communication and the consistency of communication or a message to not just that individual, but to the team collectively. Like, is the same thing that I'm telling Chris behind closed doors when he and I are talking, the same thing that I'm saying out loud in public? And that kind of shows this consistency of like, oh, well, he told me that behind closed doors, which means that he's saying this out loud, that this is something that we're all working on. He's probably saying those same things to other individuals behind closed doors. And again, so like these are things that I think are just needed to help make sure that people feel that there is a sense of accountability going on amongst the team.
Right. I want to make it clear, though, I do think that I think if you're on a high-performing team or you have a personal commitment to the work, you don't get to drop that personal commitment the moment you get the impression that someone else on the team is not just as committed as you. There has to be this kind of assumption that accountability is happening unless there's literally no change over a very long period of time. And when I say a long period of time, I mean like months and months and months, not days or weeks. Because again, this moves slowly. People have you want to give people the grace to get better when they are not high performing. And when I've been on teams where people just have this general impression that they're the only ones doing good work and no one else is, that their coworkers aren't doing good work, it really is. They don't really care whether or not their coworkers are doing great work. They care whether their coworkers are doing great work and not being held accountable for it. And so if someone next to me is not doing work as good as I am, but they're being held accountable for it, it's very easy to let that one go because you assume that over time they'll either get better or they will go away. But there's this kind of assumption or this feeling that leads to like a a feeling of a lack of fairness when you feel like you are putting in more work and more effort to a team and someone else is kind of just coming along for the ride. It goes back to the, high school groups where you have a group project and there's 5 people on it. There's always one person who has no problem doing a lot of the work on their own. That's just who they are. And then there's always one person who just wants to do as little as possible. And they are both happy in their roles. Most people fall into the middle group, which is, I want to do good work, but I have a really difficult time motivating myself to do good work if I'm around people who aren't also there with me. I think there's a lot of people who fall into that. And so what I want to ask you, Lorenzo, is how have you done this? How have you managed to get people to maintain a level of commitment to good work in the face of peers and coworkers who are not, when you know that it's what they're doing is not as simple as, oh, you're fired. It will take time, months maybe, to get them up to speed or to get them out, but you need to maintain that level of commitment to high performance in the meantime. So I want to ask you that, but first I want to give it a word from one of our sponsors. All right, Lorenzo. So there's always going to be people who will, they have that internal commitment to doing great work regardless of what their peers are doing. And there will always be people who are just trying to do as little as possible. The bulk of the people need to believe there's accountability. They need to feel that accountability. They need to feel their team members are doing good work. How do you maintain that when you can't necessarily stand somebody up in front of you and say, you need to do better?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think for me, there's 2 big elements to this. I think sometimes you have to publicize the pain points. And here's what I mean by that. If I know that there are people that may be lacking in, like, let's make it easy. Let's say something like maybe it's attendance or something, like they're just not coming to work. And that's causing maybe some additional work that has to be done by other people.
Right.
I think getting in front of the team and saying like, hey, I'm aware that we have some, concerns around attendance and people being here. That's something that I know causes all of you additional work and can be, kind of a negative drag on what we're working to do. So first and foremost, I want to thank everybody who's been able to, consistently be here on time and get the work done. And know that we want to have conversations to understand. First, we want to make sure that if there's anything that our people need, that our team needs, that we can provide them with whatever that might be to help them. Because sometimes we all know there are times when you can't come to work because there's outside forces that you have to deal with, and we want to make sure that they're there. But we also want to understand that because we know how being here is such an important part of what we do, and that we all need each other to be here when we're expected to be here. So I just wanted to make you all aware that it's something that we're aware of, that I'm working on as your leader. So publicize it. Let people know. Hey, I know that we've had some deltas in our collective performance, as a team. Like collectively, we're not where we want to be. I know that there are some people on our team that are maybe exceeding where we want to be, but I know we have some opportunities. So like, we just want to call that out. What we want to do in leadership is close that gap. That may require some training. That may require some perspective. That may require some follow-up. And what I'm going to ask of you is to help one another, because you may be finding some success in something, and I may have a conversation with one of your peers that may be struggling, and I might send them to come talk to you to get help, to get better. So that's going to be my ask of you. We're going to have these conversations, but I'm going to ask you of this. So again, I'm publicizing the things that we're going to have around accountability to both give people the heads up, to let people know that this is kind of something we're going to talk about, but also to ask for their help and support in understanding that there may be some issues here that are not just as simple as somebody doesn't want to do a good job, and we need to have that conversation. And then I think after you maybe publicize some of these pain points to make it clear that this is what you're going to do, there's, you have a calendar, you have meetings, you have people that you're going to spend time with. You're going to, whether they're not in their cubicle, but they're in your office. People know that they're not in their cubicle, that they're in your office. Whether you're walking somebody through, and say, hey, like, let's go have our touch base, and let's, walk through, wherever we're working, and go sit down over here somewhere where we have privacy, but also it's in public.
Yeah.
Like it's not to the point of sitting down with somebody in an office to give them some formal documentation around their employment. I just want to talk to you a little bit about what's going on in your life and how can we help you. And I've noticed that maybe your attendance has been this. Is this accurate? Is everything okay? Is there anything that you need? Even though we're having a private conversation, we can do that in a place where people could potentially see us having a conversation. And I think these are also ways that you can help the team understand that we're going to have these conversations, and that it's not in such a way that it's all hidden and that it's all private. The conversation might be in private, but the fact that we're having the conversation doesn't necessarily have to be in private. And we're not announcing to the team like, "Hey, everybody, I'm going to go spend time with Chris right now talking about his horrible attendance." I'm not doing that, right? I'm just saying, "Hey, Chris, let's go grab some time together." And we just so happen to be walking by people. We just so happen to be having that in an open space area or a cafeteria or somewhere where we could be seen. And people can connect whatever dots they want to connect. They can be like, "Well, dang, Lorenzo was just talking about attendance. And I know that Chris sometimes is not here when he's supposed to be here. And now Lorenzo and Chris are having a conversation in the cafeteria. It might be about attendance. I don't know." Right.
Yeah.
But like, these are ways that are helpful in establishing and creating a culture of accountability, when you're not going to go out there, to your point earlier, and just call somebody out in public. That's not the right thing to do. But there are definitely ways that you can show people that these conversations are definitely happening.
Right, right. And you know, there's an old adage I heard once that people have this kind of tendency to believe that things are about them. Whatever's happening, that they're the center of their own world and things are about them. If you're calling out something to a team about whatever the pain points are in generalized terms and not making about one person, the people who are having that issue, they believe they're the ones being spoken to in that moment, even if you're not necessarily saying their names. They believe they are, especially if you are saying it to them personally in one-on-ones, both before or after that kind of general conversation, to make sure they know it. But yeah, there's just kind of like bringing it out there as a whole, talking about it amongst the group and letting them know what the expectations are. It's really, really easy for the people who are having those issues to understand that, okay, this person's serious about it. The leader is serious about whatever this thing is. And, you know, attendance is an easy one, but there's a lot of things that can be done that way. There are a lot of things you can talk about with your group, as opposed to, you know, just having these one-on-one things. And honestly, you should anyway, because the expectations that you set privately should be the same expectations you set publicly. There should be no difference between how you set up things as a leader to your group, to all your people together, versus the individual expectations if it's something they're going to be held accountable for.
Absolutely. And with that, it brings us to the end of this episode. This is Hack Your Leadership. I'm Lorenzo.
And I'm Chris.
And have a great day.